Hello, everyone, and thank you to Sarmaya for this opportunity to talk about my work. My name is Sarita, and I am a researcher with an interest in material and visual culture, particularly the object systems surrounding folk performances of South India. This March, I was to go to Aliparamba, my ancestral village in North Kerala, to attend a puram or an annual village festival, but impending lockdown prevented that trip. Besides my ancestral connection to the place, I have been attending this festival for a few years now as part of an arts research and documentation grant from the India Foundation for the Arts. This study, called The Goddess and Her Lieutenant, looks at what I call object systems within village festivals and has since been produced as a monograph. The festival marks the visit to the village by goddess Bhagawati or Kali, embedded in the form of the Thira performer and Shiva's lieutenant as the Poothan performer, both from the Mannan community. During the festival days, the duo walk through the village, blessing all that they see and banishing evil spirits. What do I mean by object systems? Objects and object systems have marks of history on them, and they can be considered the material forms of a myriad collective memories. In most traditional societies, objects are part of symbolic systems that interweave and even contradict functional structures. The purpose of objects within these systems is to signify, to serve as reminders for philosophical and spiritual concepts, and not just serve a pure function. Of course, the mash of fact and historical mythology surrounding spaces such as these are best known to those who live in the village. But most of the participating objects do gather a power of their own, what can only be called a charisma. So the task is to seek out the meanings behind the charisma of these object systems and look for a resonance with festivals of a similar nature globally. In this talk, I'll share a glimpse of my study. Nestled between the distant Western Ghats and the Nila River, Aliparamba was often cut off from nearby towns during heavy monsoons. The separation of the village would provoke platitudes from those staying just a few kilometers away. They would exclaim, "The soil is richer, more fertile, the people peculiar, prone to all sorts of excesses, the coconut water sweeter, the pappadams crisper." But it was its very separation that made it the perfect contained study. The rhetoric of an idyllic Kerala landscape of lush green paddy fields and swaying coconut fronds is true for only a few months in a year. In the summer months, the earth gets parched and dry, and the sun unrelenting in its strength. It is then difficult to imagine that in less than 2 months, the brown earth will transform into rich verdant hues with monsoon thunder showers flooding the fields, and the earth would soon live up to its promise of fertility. And while the dry paddy fields become an alternate stage to play out the eternal and cyclic, rituals themselves offer an allegory, a reminder of the precarious, catastrophic, uncertain, and hazardous nature of human existence, but also a reassurance of eternal cyclicity. So within the rituals are objects that participate to create a cyclic stage, serving as reminders of philosophical concepts. Music, smells, lights, and colors spiral and waft, renewing hope and promise, imaging and imagining within the same space the ephemeral and the fugitive, alongside the eternal and immutable. Objects come together in a time and space installation through the column drawing that is made for 21 days every evening and then ritually wiped out, a reminder of Srishti, Sthiti, Samhara, creation, continuation, and destruction. The next of the object systems are what I call time markers. The raising of the temple flag, or the kodi, heralds the start day of the festival. It stays hoisted from that day to the final day, through the other ceremonies conducted, like the Kalam Puja. On the final day of festivities at dawn, a Kalikutta, an orchestra of about 5 musicians, mostly percussion, performs at the temple ground, the music resonating across the village. Sound and rhythm from drums have often been used to build up emotions and encourage community participation prior to precise timekeeping mechanisms, such as clocks or the radio. Along with these reassuring sounds that break through customary morning babbles are visions that can be seen as time markers, as a villager once told me. She said, "The sounds from the paddy fields, the slow drums and the clangs of the anklets and waist bells, the vision of them coming down the paddy field, a reminder that today I have to finish work early and meet everyone at the temple grounds. Houses get ready to be visited by the goddess and her lieutenant, the Poothan and the Thira. Offerings of cloth, paddy, and rice are kept ready for the performers, who announce their arrival by beating the parai drums and dancing in the outer courtyard of the houses. The Poothan and the Thira performers are part of the Mannan community. After receiving their offering, they throw rice ceremoniously to bless the household. At the houses are also objects that act as intermediaries in contact zones. ആറ് നാഴി അരി, ഒരു പറ നെല്ല്, ഒരു മുണ്ട്. A measure of paddy, a measure of rice, a waistcloth. These offerings are given to the Poothan and Thira performers when they visit households to bless them. A full para or measure of paddy indicates a rich harvest. On special occasions, a para of paddy and coconut flowers symbolizes wealth, prosperity, and opulence, and in turn happiness. During the puram, the para of nilla takes on a different meaning as a transactional object at the contact zone between communities. The Mannan community were earlier compelled as part of tradition to visit the patron houses to get the meager offerings of rice. And even if today they have no need for that rice as their economic situation has improved, this ritual, however reluctantly, is retained. These interdependent relationships between various castes were once useful for the sustenance of an agrarian feudal society. Cultural events as a means to perpetuate these relationships have lost their relevance today. Even if many households no longer hold agricultural land, as far as possible, communities at both ends of the transaction, those offering and those receiving, continue the custom. We often think that social networks are just made up of people, but it is not only so. The rice, the paddy, the cloth, and the act of offering and receiving are social objects that are part of a network that connects people to objects and objects to people. And then there are the objects that provide rhythm. In the afternoon, villagers gather in the temple ground and paddy fields, dressed in resplendent colors, almost in defiance of the lack of color on the fields. It is a joyous occasion where families meet. On the evening of the festival day, masked, bejeweled, and caparisoned creatures mix with mortals. The lines between mythology and reality blur on that day. It is as if the gods have descended on earth to offer hope. All the different acts come together and converge into the paddy fields. There are a variety of percussion instruments with a range of tones, rhythms, and speeds. The big parai drums accompany the Thira performers while the Tudi accompanies the Poothan. While the Poothan Thira performers and the formal and classical percussion ensembles have a structured rhythm, the tom-tom drummers are uninhibited and unstructured, with gestures bordering on the lute. There is no physical barrier between the performers and the spectators, and the classical and the rough all combine into one. Thank you once again, Sarmaya, for this opportunity.